This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth, coming at you here today with a PFT exclusive. This is the story of a Canadian citizen who was targeted by the Canadian government, all because he was an innovator whose company was poised to completely disrupt the securities transfer agent and custodian sector. This is an industry which is costing investors and issuers over $10 billion a year. So this is a company whose time has come, and this has led to some powerful interests who don't want their boats being rocked to destroy this Canadian company, all because they were willing to do something positive and innovative for the financial sector here in Canada and indeed the world. And the company is called Equibit, and I'm now joined on the line by the man who is suing CSIS over this, Chris Horlacher. Chris, thank you so much for taking some time here on Press for Truth to tell us your story. Now, I want to get behind this lawsuit that you have going against CSIS and essentially the Canadian government. But before we get into all that, maybe you can take us back to the beginning of how this crazy story began for you.
Thanks, Dan. It started, I guess, in 2012 when I was working with the Mises Institute of Canada, giving weekly talks at Popper's Pub in downtown Toronto. And we were visited quite often by a man who's now quite well known in the Canadian crypto space, Anthony Diorio. And he kept bringing up cryptocurrencies. He eventually gave a talk about Bitcoin and how he felt it was going to change the world. And I had been following the progress of Bitcoin since about 2010. And to be honest, I think I was probably the only credentialed financial professional who was really even starting to get involved in the space, or maybe even aware of this emerging technology. But Anthony really kind of sold me on it, and I began advising him. And this is before Ethereum, before Decentral. He was involved in other projects that I helped him divest and coached him through the creation of Decentral and the Bitcoin Association of Canada. I met Vitalik back when he was writing the white paper for Ethereum. And so I was very heavily involved in the Canadian crypto space at the very beginning. And working in finance, eventually as the chief financial officer of a securities dealer, put me face to face with what is kind of referred to as the back office. And this is everything that happens after the brokers and the stock exchanges do what they do. All of their paperwork gets passed to this other corner of the securities industry. And this is where you find transfer agents and custodians, who are like the depositories, the bank vaults, and the bookkeepers of the securities industry. And it's kind of a pedantic, thankless task, but it's a giant industry nevertheless. Thousands of people are involved, and it costs the brokers and the exchanges and the issuers and ultimately the investors, because they're the ones paying all of the commissions. It costs them billions upon billions upon billions of dollars per year to sustain what is essentially a bookkeeping and operation and a mailroom. And with the emergence of Bitcoin, I eventually came to the realization around 2014 that this could be so much more. And seeing Vitalik turn Bitcoin or come out with Ethereum, I felt that that was a little too much. We didn't need a blockchain that could be all things to all people. We needed blockchains to be specialized to a particular task because they're already pretty slow and inefficient. But they're also very reliable and very secure. And as a foundation for a securities industry, that's exactly what you're looking for. You don't want things to be easily changed. So with the promise of being able to automate a lot of these processes and offload it from bookkeepers and mailrooms into crypto miners, to me, that looked like a winning situation. And so the idea of Equibit began percolating in the back of my mind. By about 2016, we had begun actually developing this. We brought in an angel investor who put about $150,000 into the company. We hired our first developers and got rolling and building out something that we could prove the concept that this would actually work for a securities industry. And we were very satisfied with how this was going. I started speaking at public events. One of the main ones I spoke at was called Tech TO. I was speaking about Bitcoin to an audience of about 700 people, mostly from the downtown Bay Street group. And there I met a team of lawyers from Davies, Ward, Phillips, and Weinberg, which is one of the top securities law firms in the country. And I don't have enough good things to say about these people because they were such a tremendous help for everything that came afterwards. But so we began going back and forth with these lawyers about how this system was going to work, how it would legally fit into the industry, and beginning to lay the groundwork for not a countercultural use of this system, but actually mainstreaming it and getting stock exchanges and broker dealers to use this. And point of fact, the vast majority of securities do not trade on a stock exchange. Stock exchanges worldwide only have about 10,000 companies on them. There are hundreds of thousands of companies whose securities are traded every day, and nobody ever sees it because this all happens in another market called the over-the-counter market. And that is orders of magnitude more inefficient than the stock exchanges. And that was our initial sort of target market. And as we continued working on this project, dealers from those corners of the industry and private funds were coming to us, I think collectively managing several $1 trillion of assets. And they were all waiting for us to finish and to start moving all of these companies and all these securities.
So they want to
onto
literally
the system.
transition into the blockchain-based technology that your company was working on, and this is what kind of shook things up, I would imagine.
Yeah, it rattled, I'm sure it rattled the custodians who are raking in fees for not doing much of anything really. And then also the transfer agents, which chief among them, I think the three largest ones in the industry are ComputerShare, Euroclear, and DTCC. They process quadrillions of dollars of transactions annually. The numbers boggle the mind. But so back to Davies, we wanted to begin a pre-sale of the EQB cryptocurrency unit. And you have to have a cryptocurrency on a blockchain because it's the only way to pay your miners. It's free software. You don't know who the miners are or where they are. So it's the only way to pay them for their efforts is to embed a currency right into the blockchain. So we had to have this there. And we'd already seen this with Ethereum. You could finance the development of these new protocols by pre-mining a small portion of the blockchain and selling that to the early adopters. And so that's what we plan to do. Davies looked into what the EQB token looked like from a use case scenario and agreed that that yes, this is a cryptocurrency. Right now, the CRA, the tax authority, they consider this commodities. The securities regulators hadn't even gotten involved in the industry at this point. They were only just beginning to talk about these things. And so after we got this opinion from Davies, we actually went to the OSC, the Ontario Securities Commission, because we were proceeding very carefully. We wanted to make sure that we had something that would be accepted into the industry. So that means you kind of have to play ball and play the game if you want to be part of that, if you want to be in that club, I guess. Now we met with a team called Launchpad, which is their emerging technologies group. They deal mostly with startups, and we met with we had a meeting scheduled with several of their team. We initially met with the Launchpad lawyer named Amy Tsai, and one of their accountants was there named Niti Varma. The leader of Launchpad was initially on the meeting. Her name is Pat Chakos, but she didn't show up. But about 30 seconds into telling them what it is that we had designed and were building, they stopped us and they ran out of the room and got Pat Chakos and brought her right into the room to hear what we were talking about. And we finished this whole, Equibit spiel and ended the discussion with Pat asking us, okay, so why are you here? What do you want? And I asked her point blank, do you consider the EQB cryptocurrency a security? One, and two, do you foresee the OSC taking issue with this technology as I've described it to you? And so to the first question, that bounced over to Amy Tsai, and she said, well, go talk to your lawyers, which we of course already had. And to the second question, they said, no, we're taking a light touch on this stuff. Keep going, were her words, keep going. And so in February 2016, we opened up the EQB presale. Shortly afterwards, we were approached again by Pat Chokos and Amy Tsai, immediately starting to harass us. We see you're pre-selling EQB. You've got to put a stop to this. It might be a security. And so their behavior towards us completely changed. And so we actually suspended the pre-sale and had meetings with them. And in those meetings, they revealed that they had not even bothered looking at the documentation we were showing the people. They didn't look at the terms and conditions. They hadn't read the white paper. And when we were talking with them, they didn't seem to even know what a white paper was. They seemed to treat it as though it were an offering document, when everybody knows a white paper is an engineering schematic. That's what it's always been. You can go to any big tech company and download white papers, technical schematics on their products or things that they are developing or working on. So it's never been a investor document. We had a separate set of terms and conditions for the pre-sale, which outlined things in almost to the same degree as an investor, a professionally done investor document, because again, we were working with a securities law firm to take care of all of this for us. So we had a very detailed set of terms and conditions, not like what you would typically see in a crypto pre-sale. But nevertheless, they didn't read any of it and proceeded against us with a kind of quasi enforcement action. But eventually, after it came out that they, had stuck their foot in their mouths over all this, which we have on the record, they then told us to resume and finish the pre-sale, which we did. We raised about a little over $500,000 US in the pre-sale, which was very successful for us because it got us to the next stage, which was at that point then we took it private, because we said, well, we don't want to be dealing with the OSC if this is how they're going to behave. So we took it private. And then we turned it into an actual private security sale. No public was allowed to participate, only accredited investors, and not even Canadian investors. We cut Canada out of the picture at this point, because again, the OSC was too unpredictable about what they were doing and how they were acting towards us. And so again, we finally got the legal done for that, and then opened that up, and then raised another $2 million US dollars. So we were very successful at funding this project while we could. But as we were doing this, the OSC kept getting more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive with the industry. And we also started seeing other, ICOs, so-called, coming out. And one in particular I recall was Impact Finance, which is a company out of Montreal. And they were lauded as Canada's first ICO. And that was a lie, because they knew it was us. We were the first Canadian company to do this, but they wanted us shut out of the media, which was very difficult to do because I was appearing on CBC and BNN Bloomberg talking about how things were going. But, they wanted to pretend we were not there. And so these quasi enforcement actions eventually turned into a actual enforcement action, which we just coughed up whatever information they wanted. I come from a Big Four auditor background, so I had meticulously documented absolutely every transaction this company did. And so whatever they wanted, like, I was there ready and waiting for them with all of it. I could drown them in the information that they wanted. And I don't think they expected that, which is odd because they knew I was a chartered accountant. But nevertheless, we withstood the brunt of this investigation and this persistent harassment from the OSC that went on for about a year and a half. Now, eventually, the company decided, we can't stay here. This environment has gotten far too hostile. We're going to Switzerland, because we had begun courting the Swiss government, which was very positive on cryptocurrencies. And they even issued us something called a no action letter. Now, this is something that Canadian people are probably not that familiar with, but because they don't do it there. But in other jurisdictions, like particularly the US, but also in Switzerland, if you want to do something and you're not really sure where this falls within the existing legal framework, you can go to the regulator and say, well, this is what we want to do. Can you give us a no action letter? Which is essentially a written document that says, okay, so long as these are the things you're doing, we will not take action against you. And we got that in writing from the Swiss government. And so off we went to try and finish, the pre-sale of all of these Equibits, because by then the company had grown to, we had about a staff of about 12 people and another 6 contractors, all working on this project. We had 2 people in marketing, myself and 1 other people handling the finance and the administrative work, and everything else was being poured into development of this technology. And ultimately, we had something built that really worked. And I think it was in sometime around June or May or June of 2019 or 2018. 2018, we had gotten our wallet and the network protocol to the point where we were starting to demonstrate what this could do. And we actually had our developer with 2 wallets open, using 1 wallet to hold both Equibits and Bitcoin, take his Equibits, create a security, and then do what's called a cross-chain atomic swap with Bitcoin with those Equibit securities. Now, that is a technological feat that no development company today has ever replicated. That was the holy grail of crypto, atomic swaps, not just atomic swaps, but cross-chain atomic swaps. That meant within it, without ever leaving the wallet, you could swap Bitcoin for Equibit, or Equibit for Ether, or Equibit for Monero. So long as the Equibit coin was one side of this, our wallet could do these cross-chain swaps. And it could happen with monetary crypto, but it could also happen with any security registered on the Equibit blockchain.
Well, I would imagine that once you actually demonstrated that, how it works in the real world, this essentially triggered the Canadian government to take the gloves off, right? And I want to get to the point of where they started playing a little more dirty, and then you quite literally took them to court over this. But how did they start really playing dirty behind the scenes when it comes to screwing with you and your family?
Yeah, so around the time that this demo came out, the lead developer on the protocol disappeared for 2 weeks, complete radio silence. He was a Russian national by the name of Sergei Sakov, and he was in Canada. He'd been in Canada for years and years and years, married a Canadian, had a child with a Canadian, and was working on becoming a citizen. He, throughout the years I worked with him, he's a very, very nice guy, did not want to be in Russia. But he disappears for 2 weeks and says, I have to go back to Russia. Okay, but he says he's going to take a week. Week goes by, he's not back. Another week goes by, we're emailing that week, hey Sergey, where are you? We're worried, what's going on? Because in other roles I've had at other companies, I've seen development staff get kidnapped and ransomed back to the companies. That's a real thing, and I was worried that this was happening to us. But Sergey came back safe and sound, sort of, because then he comes into the office and he explains to us that he had been dragged into CSIS offices and interviewed by 2 CSIS agents. He refused to disclose who they were to us, which means I probably know who they are. And he says that they knew insider information about the company. They had access to company information that they should not have had access to. And they were looking into what we were building. And so they also appear to have threatened his naturalization process and said that he had to go back to Russia in order to divest himself of some sort of business interest he still had back there. How they even knew about this is a mystery. But so, of course, wanting to become a Canadian citizen, he goes off and does that. But shortly after he comes back, he starts acting very strangely. He sends me some Telegram messages where he says he wants to join the inner circle of the company and take on, more, a more inside position in the company. And then 2 days after that, he quits. And when he's supposed to do the handoff of his code and everything that he had created, then we realized that for the last couple of months, he'd been sending us fake code. And not only that, the real code, wherever that was he says he lost it. More likely he destroyed it or stole it at the behest of CSIS.
So he was compromised, but do you think CSIS infiltrated the company through him, or was he like an informant all along?
I believe that he was leveraged into a confidential informant due to his position within the company, and they found the lever, they found his button. He did not want to have to go back to Russia for any reason, so they threatened that process. Now, whether or not there were other informants or agents in the company is a matter of this suit. We've been trying to find out who they are or who that might be. I myself submitted several information requests on CSIS, which the first one was I wanted everything that they had on Equibit and myself, and they denied that on national securities grounds. I took that denial. Now, we were a federally subsidized scientific research facility. We were officially recognized by the CRA as a scientific research and experimental development company. We were getting tax credits from the government to do our work. And so here's, the right hand of government is sabotaging what the left hand is helping us do, which was shocking in and of itself. But so then I took this denial to the Office of the Information Commissioner, and rather than read the complaint, they started trying to elicit more information from me. And this was at this point we had begun our lawsuit against CSIS. So, I said, this is privileged stuff. I'm not telling you any of this. It's not relevant to the complaint. You have all the information you need to make a decision. So then they just decide immediately, we're going to uphold this denial. Screw you, Chris, you don't get to know. Now, the other request was a little more general. I sent them something. I wanted to know everything that they had in what's called the Integrated Terrorism and Assessment Center, which is their internal reporting system. It's like a newswire. that they maintain internally where intelligence information gets posted. And I wanted them to run a search through that for the word Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. They did that, and I did get a response. And guess what? There's nothing in that database on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So why is CSIS involved at all? Why are they interested in this stuff when their own reporting center gives them no indication that they should have their hands anywhere near this stuff?
Wow. This screams of absolute corruption coming from the highest levels of government because they are essentially afraid of your company disrupting the financial industry moving forward. And I want to get into this lawsuit, where you're at with this today against CSIS. But before we do, I want to go very quickly to hear a very quick message, very important and relevant to today's topic, and then we'll be right back right after this, guys. All right, guys, I just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about my friends at Patriot Gold Group, especially when we're talking about such high levels of corruption within the government. As we're showing you here today, there are bad actors doing very shady things behind the scenes on behalf of these financial institutions who are running the show. The same institutions, by the way, who are directly responsible for the high inflation that we're all feeling right now, because they keep just printing money into oblivion. Now, I know that viewers of this channel are smart enough to know that in these troubling times, and especially moving into global recession and hyperinflation, gold and silver have always held up as a fantastic hedge in these troubling times. And when you call this number on the screen, guys, you'll get connected to a free consultant, a guide who's going to set you up with a plan moving forward. This is a preferred phone number for Press for Truth viewers. And when you call, you'll get connected to a real live person, not some sort of robot or AI automated machine, a real person who's going to help you set you up with the plan moving forward, guys. One of the things they specialize in is IRAs and 401ks that are backed by physical precious metals like gold and silver. This is an awesome, awesome thing. Again, you call the number on the screen. This is a preferred number for Press for Truth viewers. You'll get connected to a free consultant. And again, they will help you get set up with a solid plan moving forward. And I've done my due diligence looking into these guys. They are like #1 rated, you know, Better Business Bureau, Consumer Affairs #1 for the last 5 years in a row. Top-notch guys. And if you don't want to talk to a live person, you can just click on the link in the description below, tell them that PFT sent you. You'll get that preferred treatment. And again, they specialize in IRAs, 401ks backed by precious metals. Even if you already have an IRA, they'll roll it over for you. And you might even be eligible for a no-fee IRA for life. Again, when you call the number on the screen, guys, because we're heading into very troubling times and they're playing some very shady games. But if you make the right moves, you'll come out on top. And Patriot Gold Group is some of the best people to work with in these troubling times, guys. So call that number on the screen. Once again, it's free to call. It doesn't cost you anything. You'll get set up with a free consultant, a guide who will set you up with an investment kit, a plan moving forward. Once again, click the links in the description or call the number on the screen to get set up with my friends at Patriot Gold Group. All right, man, this is crazy stuff so far. Now, let's talk a little bit about the lawsuit that you have going against the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Tell us when that was launched and where we're at with it now.
Yeah, so things didn't work out so well in Switzerland. The crypto market crashed in late 2018. And at that point, you know, without any more ability to fund development, because we had to rebuild everything that Sergey had stolen or destroyed, that just wasn't going to happen. So unfortunately, in early 2019, we moved back to Canada. My wife and I shut down the company. And, you know, that was 2019 was a very hard year for us. We had done everything we could to try and save this company. We even went to November 2018, we had gone to a conference in Vegas called World CryptoCon, trying to look for people to invest in the project. Unfortunately, nothing came out of that except heartache, because my wife, she was the one night I was not with her, she gets drugged, and two men attempted to kidnap her there. Now, fortunately, she was with some good friends who prevented this, but we know who these people are. One of them is a crypto influencer, so-called, from Australia, which, as we know, is a member of the Five Eyes network. And so he's one of these influencers who just, all of a sudden, oh, I put up a YouTube channel, talk about crypto, and then, within a matter of months, you've got hundreds of thousands of followers. And we see stuff like this happening all the time. And Dan, I know you know how hard it is building an audience, a real audience. Mm-hmm. So these kinds of things started tipping me off that the crypto industry as a whole is there's a lot more deep state stuff going on in crypto than anybody, I think, is willing to admit. Mm-hmm. Shortly after that event as well, I was the victim of a SIM swap attack, which is where somebody tries to hijack your phone messages so that they can break into your accounts. Fortunately, I don't use SMS authentication for everything. I'm smart enough to know that is a terrible idea, so it didn't work. But then in early 2020, I started filing the lawsuits, and learning what I did from these previous attacks, I anticipated that my home network would start getting broken into. So I set up a device called a honeypot and named it Equibit Development. And sure enough, shortly after I filed this lawsuit, somebody immediately starts breaking into my home network. And guess what? Those Rogers and Bell gateways that that everybody has, that they tell you have to use, are backdoors right onto your home network. They can see absolutely every packet of data that goes through that machine. Not only that, but if they want into your home network to start poking around, it's a secret warrant. I've talked to security professionals in Canada. I know how it works now.
So you knew they were going to be coming. You knew they were going to be looking at it. So you created a honeypot, a ruse, some sort of a trap. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a computer on the network, and you just give it a name that would be that somebody who somebody who you're trying to trap might find attractive. Mm-hmm. In this case, Equibit. Equibit's my, it's the bullseye on my back at this point. So I created this device, found some free software, put it on a Raspberry Pi, plugged it into my home network, and turned the thing on. And of course, every time it interacts with a machine, any machine, for any reason whatsoever, every last little snippet and packet of data that this thing handles is logged and report back to me where the request came from and where it sent its response to. Now, I mean, there's nothing actually on it. It's a trap. It's a trap to basically designed to suck in a hacker or somebody who's trying to gather information and keep them in this controlled environment and observe them as in as much detail as they can. And so I caught somebody doing that. I also caught somebody trying to break into my contact list, because at this point in time, I realized that you have to have sovereignty over your data. You have to self-host. And so I started turning on, I stopped logging into all of my social media. I started shutting down my Google Drive, my OneDrive, all of my cloud services, all of my contact lists, calendars, and started bringing them in-house on my own device. And sure enough, that device was being attacked as well. So these lawsuits went out in early 2020 against CSIS. The two supposed CSIS agents, Sergei Sakov and another developer who we suspect might have been an informant, although the evidence on him is a little thin. But interestingly enough, so when you serve somebody a lawsuit in Canada, they have 20 days from the date of service to respond, unless they file something called a statement of, or a notice of intent to defend, in which case you get an extra 10 days. The government filed that notice immediately as soon as we serve them. And I'm sure that is normal procedure every time the government gets sued for everything. Oh, they just have a whole bunch of them and they just pass them out. 30 days goes by, they haven't filed a defense. Sergey also, not even a notice of intent to defend. So he only got 20 days. He also does not defend against himself. Meaning my accusations now, the court must take as true. So the government and Sergey have both been essentially, according to the rules of civil procedure, they are deemed, it says right in the act, they are deemed to admitted to the truth of my allegations.
Simply by failing to fight against it?
Yes. Now, here's where the corruption of the court system is on full display now, because as far as the government is concerned, they grant themselves an exemption to that rule. My own lawyers have told me as much, that it doesn't matter, 20 days, 30 days, they're going to take as long as they feel like to file that defense. And the court is just, it's bad procedure to actually try and force a default judgment on the government. The courts just don't do it. So we did eventually get a one-page statement of defense from the government, just saying, I know nothing, I saw nothing. Almost a year after we served them. Now, the other developer we sued, he's just a lone guy, young guy in his 20s, not a sophisticated person, certainly doesn't have the attorney general behind him. He filed the same defense within a week. Now you, the Attorney General of Canada, are going to say, did you really need 11 months to file the same defense as that kid?
Right.
Now, regardless, we're proceeding with a motion against Sergey for default judgment. And as far as the government is concerned, the next step is disclosure, at which point, the court can start ordering them to produce documents. Forget about access to information in the Office of the Information Commissioner.
Yeah.
The problem is that CSIS is routinely destroying files all the time. They've been ordered to produce documents in so many court cases by the court, and they just show up with an empty box and say, whoops, it's all gone.
Right. How just how unbelievably corrupt is the system that they would essentially stifle innovation for something that is going to save people potentially billions and billions of dollars, and going behind the scenes doing these dirty tricks, potential kidnappings and druggings, and as I understand it, they even cracked into your phone. Didn't they take your Telegram page down? I mean, nothing is guaranteed to be safe at this point.
Yeah, so just a couple of weeks ago, just as I started to go public with this story, I've written out a statement you can share with your audience. It's on Google Drive, I know, but it's very shareable. It's still there. But I started sharing that statement on Telegram, and within 48 hours, my Telegram account was wiped out without any notice.
Yeah, that kind of speaks volumes when you actually read this document, as I have, and it outlines everything, not only as the story you told us here today, but with links and references and examples to all the things that you've spoken about today. So I would really, really encourage people to dig deeper into this story by taking a look at the document in the description below that really outlines this crazy, crazy story and this case that essentially is the Canadian government against the Canadian people. You are representing the innovative entrepreneurship spirit of a great deal of Canadians, but a lot of people don't know that behind the scenes, these people aren't even given a chance as they continue to try to take out guys like you. So I mean, I guess in closing, I want to keep up with you on this, as I'm sure this is going to roll out over who knows how long it's going to take to resolve this. But I mean, what sort of lessons can people learn from this? Entrepreneurs, businesses in Canada, startups, people who are trying to shake things up, particularly within the financial sector in Canada? I mean, is it a complete monopolization? Is there even a point of trying? Are we up against, like, it's like trying to go up against the waves of the ocean? Or is it possible to use blockchain technology to actually free people in Canada when it comes to their financial ability to operate themselves financially? What do you think?
I think my experience has revealed a lot in terms of just how controlled innovation really is in Canada. But at the same time, I think this lawsuit does offer innovators and the public at large a little hope in cracking this up, because the numbers are not small. It's a $120 million lawsuit against the federal government and CSIS, which technically they have failed to defend. And they're in quite possibly the worst position they could ever be in terms of me prosecuting this case. I'm not in the country anymore. They can't reach me. They can't, whatever their plan B was for dealing with me, it's now out of their hands. And so we're in an interesting situation now where it's not the government's boot on our neck, it's our boot on theirs. And we have a real opportunity to take these people by the neck and say, you work for us and back off.
Yes, absolutely. It's about time somebody had the balls to stand up and do exactly that. I mean, maybe that's what it took. It's somebody like you being pushed up against the wall, backed into a corner. But what do you do when a dog gets backed in the corner? He's gonna bite back, and
that's gonna start biting.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, before we go, though, one last thing I wanted to mention is just the other thing I was stunned by was the absolute wall of silence I've received from the Canadian media, because I said I contacted you, but I contacted over a dozen other reporters and media agencies in Canada. Least of all the Canadian press, the National Post, the Globe and Mail, Bloomberg, Forbes, the CBC, the Ottawa Citizen, mainstream, but also alternative media, Rabble.ca, Western Standard, Rebel News. None of these people want to talk about this. You are the only one, Dan. And so I thank you for this opportunity.
Well, of course. I mean, as I said, this is a company whose time has come, and this whole story basically exposes the actual corruption going on behind the scenes, not only within the financial sector, but just with business startups and innovation in general. So this is something that I hope people and the audience will help go viral, so that people will understand and learn about Equibit, learn about your story, and realize what we're up against here in this country. So yeah, it's my pleasure to be able to provide the PFT platform for you to be able to get this story out there. Do you have any other final thoughts or any things that you want to plug moving forward?
Well, definitely, if you have 5 minutes, read the statement and forward it to your favorite bloggers and reporters, and let's see if we can make some noise.
Well said. I'm going to strongly encourage everybody to take a look at all the links in the description. Share this document. Give it a read. It's only going to take you about 5 minutes. Share it with your friends and family and people who need to see this, because again, this is corruption at the highest level being exposed, and maybe we're going to win this one. And wouldn't that be awesome? We'd chalk one up for the good guys. So once again, I want to strongly encourage everybody to check that out. Links are located in the description below. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to break this whole thing down for us here today on Press for Truth.
Thanks, Dan.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.